أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري.
And why don't you have to say any takbir again or anything of the sort? You just turn around, stand up and continue your prayer. Because technically you are still in your prayer. This salam which you made in reality was not supposed to be there after the 2 rak'ahs. So you are still in your salah. And you need to make sujood sahu etc. due to your talking and due to your break in the prayer and due to you making this salam which was not supposed to be there in that place at that time. The author continues, وَلَوْ فَعَلَ مَا لَيْسَ مِنْ جِنْسِ الصَّلَاةِ. And if a person did an action which was not from the actions of the prayer, it was alien to the prayer, لَاسْتَوَى عَمْدُهُ وَسَهْوُهُ. Then him doing it purposefully and him doing it due to a mistake, mistakenly, I'm unaware, I'm scratching my entire body, or purposefully, I know what I'm doing and I'm scratching my entire body, it's both the same. Purposefully or mistakenly, it's the same. فَإِنْ كَانَ كَثِيرًا. If it was a lot of action, أَبْطَلَهَا. Salah is invalid. وَإِنْ كَانَ يَسِيرًا. And if it was a little bit of action, كَفِعْلِ النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم في حمله أمامة وفتحه الباب لعائشة فلا بأس. And if it was like how the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam carried Umama, or the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam opened the door for Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, then this is fine. Also take note, the author states that if it was a lot of action, then 100% your salah is invalid. But if it was a little, like as he mentioned in the examples, your salah is valid. We state, if it was a lot, and even if it was a little, either way, if there was maslaha and there was a need for you to do that action, then your salah would be valid bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. الضرب الثاني النقص كنسيان واجب. Then the author talks about the second scenario, situation wherein you make sujood as-sahu. And that is if there is a decrease in your prayer. You left out something from your prayer. And a decrease in your prayer can be one of two matters. Can be that you had left out a pillar of the prayer, or it could be that you left out a wajib action of the prayer. If you left out a pillar of the prayer purposefully, salah is invalid. If you left out a pillar forgetfully, then there's two scenarios. Take note. If you left out a pillar of the prayer and you have not yet come to the next rak'ah, you have not come to that same pillar in the next rak'ah, then you rewind. I repeat, if you left out a pillar in your rak'ah and you continued your prayer and then you remember that you left out your ruku in the previous rak'ah. If I'm now standing, I stood up for my second rak'ah. I remember I left out my ruku in my first rak'ah. What do? I rewind. I go back from this posture, I go down into my ruku and I continue from that point. So I rewind to my first rak'ah ruku and continue from that point and continue my salah and make sujood sahu at the end. That's the first scenario. If you left out a pillar forgetfully and you have not yet come to that same pillar in the next rak'ah, then you rewind. But if you have already reached the same pillar in the next rak'ah, then you continue and your rak'ah which came after the rak'ah which you had left out a pillar in, it takes the place of the rak'ah which you had left out a rukn in. Walhamdulillah. I hope you've all understood that point. Have you? Yes, no, or maybe. We repeat. If you miss out a ruku, for example, let's take it with an example. I missed out my ruku and I'm now in my sujood. I remember in my sujood, subhanallah, I missed out my ruku. What do? I rewind straight away and I go back to my posture of my ruku and continue my salah from that ruku. I go down and make my sujood again and my second sujood and continue my salah as normal. I rewinded. But if I missed out my ruku and then I went into sujood and the second sajda, stood up for the second rak'ah, I finished surah Fatiha, I recited my surah, I went down into ruku. My second rak'ah, ruku, I remembered that I missed out my ruku in the first rak'ah. now I cannot rewind because I've already reached the point of the missed pillar of the first, I've reached the point of the pillar which I had missed in the previous rak'ah. So this new rak'ah, it takes the place of the rak'ah which you had missed a pillar in. So that first rak'ah, it's just as if it totally disappeared and it's nowhere to be seen. And this new rak'ah, it took its place and you continue your salah like that. So if, for example, you missed a ruku in the first rak'ah and you only remembered in your ruku in the second rak'ah, your second rak'ah ruku will be your first rak'ah ruku, and you continue your salah from that point. So this is now your first rak'ah. And then you will come with a second, a third, and a fourth. As for your first one, which you had originally done and you had missed the ruku, it's null and void, it disappears, and you make up your sujudu sahu at the end of this prayer. Those are the two scenarios if you had forgotten a pillar. The first one, you can rewind if you have not yet reached that pillar. And the second one, if you reach that pillar in the next rak'ah, then you continue as normal, and the rak'ah which you had missed the pillar in is null and void, and you continue from that point. If, for example, you left out a wajib action in the prayer purposefully, salah is null and void. If, for example, you left out a wajib action of the prayer due to forgetfulness, you continue your prayer, and at the end of your prayer you make sujood sahu. So I hope you've understood the difference between the rukn and the wajib action and how you make up for them. A mas'ala which occurs many a times, scenario that you are seated in your tashahud posture. You've just finished your second sujood in your second rak'ah of Salatul Dhuhr. You're praying on your own, for example, or the imam, he is leading the prayer. And he's about to stand up for the third rak'ah, and he's forgotten his tashahud, and he's just a slight, he just had a quick relapse there, and he remembers, no, I need to sit, and he sits. He did not really stand up or anything of the sort. He was just there, maybe a few centimeters off the ground, and he sits. Everything is fine, nobody corrected him, everything is fine. There is no sujudu sahu at all, walhamdulillah. Second scenario, that's the imam or yourself performing salah. You forget to sit for the tashahud posture, and you begin standing up, and you are almost, you are almost reaching, you're almost standing up, and then you remember, subhanallah, no, I'm supposed to sit for tashahud. As long as you have not stood up completely, you can come back down and you continue your salah. As long as you have not yet completely stood up properly, then you can return and you complete your salah as normal. Do you perform sujood sahu? The madhab of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, they state, yes, you make sujood sahu, but we find a narration recorded by Imam al-Bayhaqi and Daraqutni that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam stated, the hadith of Mughira ibn Shu'bah, that if you did not stand up completely, then come back down and continue your prayer, and there is no sujood sahu for you. So this narration quite clear. In this scenario, there is no sujood sahu for you, walhamdulillah. Third scenario, you forgot your tashahud posture and you stood up completely. Standing up completely is what? It's a pillar of the prayer. Now that you've stood up completely, you continue your prayer and you do not go back down and you do not sit. And at the end of your salah, you make sujood sahu, and that suffices, walhamdulillah. So those were three scenarios. You're still sitting, you continue your salah, you remember, you continue, no sujood sahu. Second one, you have not yet stood up completely, you can return, no sujood sahu. Third one, you stood up completely, you continue your salah, you do not return, and you make sujood sahu at the end. الضرب الثاني النقص كنسيان الواجب. So deficiency in the prayer decrease, like for example forgetting a wajib action. فإن قام عن التشهد الأول فذكر قبل أن يستتم قائما. And the author states, so example, if you had forgotten tashahud al-awwal and you remembered it before standing up completely, رجع فأتى به. You go back down, you sit, and you continue your salah. So you sit down and you come with your tashahud and you continue your salah as normal. وَإِنِ اسْتَتَمَّ قَائِمًا لَمْ يَرْجِعْ. But if you stood up completely, then you do not return and you do not go back, but rather you continue your prayer and you make sujood sahu at the end. And the proof for this, the hadith recorded by Imam Ahmad, فَلْيَجْلِسْ إذا قام أحدكم من الركعة فلم يستتم قائما. If for example you stood up and you did not stand up completely, فإنما قائما فليجلس, then go back and sit. فإذا استتم قائما فلا يجلس, but if you stood up completely, do not go back down and sit. وَلْيَسْجُدْ سَجْدَةُ السَّهُ. So if you stood up completely, don't return back down, rather continue your salah and make sujood sahu at the end. وإن نسي ركنا فذكره قبل شروعه في قراءة ركع أخرى رجع فأتى به وبما بعده وإن ذكره بعد ذلك بطلت الركعة التي تركه منها. The author states, and this is one of the opinions in the Hanbali madhab, the author states, if you had forgotten a pillar of the prayer, then for as long as you did not begin the next rak'ah's recitation, then you can rewind. The author states, if you had forgotten a pillar of the prayer, for as long as you have not began the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha in the next rak'ah, you can rewind. But if you already began with the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha, then you cannot rewind, rather you continue your salah, and this new rak'ah will cover up for the rak'ah which had missed a pillar, and it would be null and void, it would disappear, and this new rak'ah will take its place and continue from that point. This is one of the opinions in the madhab of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And the other opinion is what we had mentioned, that the two scenarios. If for example you had missed out a pillar in your prayer, then as long as you did not reach the position of that same pillar in the next rak'ah, then you can rewind. If you missed a ruku, before the next ruku, if you remember, you can rewind. If you missed a sajda, before you reach the next sajda in the next rak'ah, then you can rewind. If you miss Surah Al-Fatiha, before you come to the point of Surah Al-Fatiha in the next rak'ah, before that point, you can rewind. But if you came to that point of Surah Fatiha or the sajda or the ruku, then you continue as normal, and the rak'ah which had missed something is null and void, and this one takes its place and continues from that point. And this opinion, which is another narration in the madhab of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, in reality it is stronger in its meaning, and this is the opinion of Ibn Uthaymeen, Sheikh Nasr al-Sa'di, and many others. Walhamdulillah. The author then states, وَإِن نَسِيَ أَرْبَعَ سَجَدَاتٍ من أربع ركعات فذكر في التشهد سجد في الحال فصحت له ركعة ثم يأتي بثلاث ركعات. If for example a person had missed one sajda in every single rak'ah of his 4 rak'ahs of salah. In the first rak'ah he only made one sajda, second rak'ah he made one sajda, third rak'ah he made one sajda, and the fourth rak'ah he made one sajda, and then he remembered. So what does he do in this scenario? He makes another sajda, and this will be his first rak'ah. As for his technically first rak'ah, and his technical second rak'ah, and his technical third rak'ah, they are all null and void. Why? Because he came and he already reached the position of the missed pillar in the next rak'ah. So it minuses and it makes null and void that which occurred previously, and you continue from that point. So the author states this will be his first rak'ah, and he needs to come back with 3 more rak'ahs. Walhamdulillah.